22.8%. That is the hotel occupancy rate across Dubai in the week of March 14th, 2026. 6 months before that number was recorded, Dubai's hotels were running at above 81% occupancy. The city had just welcomed 19.6 million international overnight visitors in 2025. Dubai International Airport had processed 95.2 million passengers, the highest annual figure ever, recorded by any airport on Earth for international traffic. The departure boards were full. The reservations lists were long. The construction cranes were still moving. Then, in less than 30 days, the machine stopped. That's 300 flights cancelled in under a week. $600 million lost every single day in regional tourist spending. 73% of available air capacity to and from the region eliminated within 10 days. 226,500 reservations cancelled across the United Arab Emirates between February 28th and March 29th. Debris from a drone strike hitting the Jumeirah Burj, Al Arab, the most photographed hotel on the planet. Fire breaking out at the Fairmont, the Palm, the artificial island that was supposed to represent the permanence of the Dubai project. Walk through Terminal 3 today, and the sound is wrong. The moving walkways hum into emptiness. The perfume counters stand lit and untouched. The departure boards scroll through cancellation after cancellation. White text on black, a long and mechanical confession. Check-in desks that once processed tens of thousands of passengers before sunrise now have no queues, no luggage, no voices, no city built faster, no city bet higher. And no city in the modern history of global tourism has fallen with this kind of speed. It did not begin as a gamble. It began as a decision. In the early 1990s, Dubai was a trading port of modest regional influence, a city of perhaps 600,000 people sitting on reserves of oil that its leadership already knew would not last. Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum did not build a tourism destination. He built a proposition, the idea that a place with no ancient ruins, no temperate climate, and no cultural heritage recognizable to the Western traveler could nonetheless become the most visited city on Earth by sheer force of ambition and capital. The Burj Khalifa opened on January 4th, 2010, as the tallest structure ever built by human hands. 828 meters of steel and glass rising from desert that had been empty scrubland 15 years before. The Palm Jumeirah, an artificial archipelago visible from space, redefined what the word infrastructure could mean. Emirates Airline, founded in 1985 with 2 aircraft and a loan of $10 million, grew into the largest international carrier on the planet, connecting Dubai to over 150 destinations and making the city the transit hub for a corridor carrying 14% of all global air passengers. In 2019, Dubai welcomed 16.7 million international overnight visitors, more than London, more than New York. Expo 2020, held between October 2021 and March 2022, drew 24 million visits. The machine, by every measure available, was still accelerating. But inside that acceleration, something was already bending. Vidhi Shah, director and head of commercial valuation at Cavendish Maxwell, described the first half of 2025 as yet another outstanding performance from Dubai's hospitality sector, a sector that had just recorded over 9.9 million international visitors in 6 months, occupancy above 81%, and average daily rates climbing 5.5% year-on-year to 745 dirhams. The numbers looked extraordinary. What they concealed was more important than what they showed. Luxury hotels were filling rooms and cutting the price to do it. Average daily rates in the luxury segment had fallen 1.9% in 2024, even as occupancy climbed 3%. Hotels were trading yield for volume. Revenue per available room across the entire market grew by only 1.3%, a figure that, adjusted for inflation, represented something closer to stagnation. The warning had been issued years before. In 2019, Sebastian Bazan, chief executive of Accor, one of the largest hotel groups operating in Dubai, said the words the market preferred not to hear. The city was, in his phrase, a bit overcrowded in terms of supply inventory. He acknowledged that Accor itself had participated in that oversupply. He was right for a time, but the underlying logic he identified never went away. It simply went quiet. By 2024, Dubai's hotel inventory had grown from 670 establishments in 2021 to around 730, a 9.3% increase in properties and nearly 11% more room keys in the same period. Over 11,300 new hotel rooms were scheduled for delivery by 2027. Of the upcoming supply confirmed for 2025, 84% was concentrated in premium categories: luxury, upper upscale, and upscale. The city was building more of exactly what it already had too much of. A second pressure was building simultaneously. Younger international travelers, the demographic that had made Dubai a social media phenomenon, were beginning to articulate a discomfort the marketing apparatus had no answer for. Dubai was spectacular in every dimension except one. It had no story that belonged to itself. Every experience was imported, replicated, or engineered. The superlatives, the tallest, the largest, the most expensive, had begun to produce a sensation no amount of architectural ambition could resolve. The feeling of a theme park that had forgotten to include a history. And on the western edge of the Arabian Peninsula, someone was watching all of this very carefully. Saudi Arabia, which had opened its doors to international leisure tourists only in 2019, after decades of near-total closure, was moving with a speed and a budget that completely reframed the regional competitive map. Riyadh was not merely catching up with Dubai, it was building something Dubai could never build. Million tourists in 2024. Inbound tourism spending reaching a record 153.61 billion Saudi riyals, approximately $40.95 billion, a 13.82% annual increase. The kingdom's tourism facilities grew 34.2% in the fourth quarter of 2025 alone. $110 billion committed to hospitality infrastructure. 362,000 new hotel rooms by 2030. The projects Dubai physically cannot replicate. Alula, a destination sitting on 200,000 years of documented human history. Neom's Trojana, the Gulf's first outdoor ski destination. Diriyah, engineered to welcome 27 million visitors annually by 2030, the Red Sea Project. Qiddiya, a planned entertainment city including a Six Flags park that opened December 31st, 2025, and a Universal Studios development. Riyadh Air, launched in 2023, already operating daily flights between Riyadh and London. Delta Airlines announced the first-ever non-stop service between Atlanta and Riyadh. Beginning October 2026, Saudi Arabia wasn't catching up with Dubai. It was building something Dubai could never build. The record books had just been updated. The event calendar for early 2026 was full. The Dubai World Cup, Global Village, Eid celebrations, international concert series. Hotels were tracking occupancy projections above 80% for the peak weeks ahead. Then the airspace closed. In the first hours after military strikes began targeting sites across the region in late February 2026, the airline response was not panic. It was protocol, safety assessments, route reviews, temporary suspensions. But within 24 hours, the scale of what was happening became impossible to contain within the language of temporary. Singapore Airlines cancelled flights to and from Dubai. British Airways suspended services to Doha. Emirates, Dubai's own flag carrier, the airline that more than any other institution had made the city a global hub, suspended all flights to Iran and Iraq and began rerouting others through flight paths that added hours and costs that made certain routes economically inviable. 12,000 flights cancelled in the first weekend alone. 21,300 cancellations recorded across 7 major airports within days of the strike's beginning. The International Air Transport Association reported that within 10 days of the first strike, carriers had cancelled roughly 73% of available seat kilometers to and from the region. Nearly 80% of services on Asia-Europe routes that typically pass through Gulf hubs were eliminated. Henry Hartfelt, founder of travel consultancy Atmosphere Research Group, named what was happening in terms the industry could not argue with. I have not seen anything like this ever outside of, frankly, the COVID pandemic. But he was precise about the difference. The pandemic had been a health-related prohibition on movement. This was geography becoming danger. This was the corridor itself, the 8-hour flying radius that covers 2/3 of the world's population, turning hostile. Anita Menderita, an international aviation and tourism consultant stranded in Bangkok when the closures began, described the mathematics clearly. When that corridor is blocked, aviation is forced to either move far north into potentially other conflict airspace, including Russia and Pakistan, or fly south. Either option puts enormous pressure on range, crew hours, and fuel costs in ways that do not resolve quickly. SC Cruises chartered 5 aircraft to evacuate roughly 5,000 passengers from the MSC Eurabia docked in Dubai with nowhere to sail. The cruise line cancelled its 3 remaining sailings from Dubai in March. The numbers tell the shape of a collapse before the eye can see it. Hotel occupancy during the week of March 14, 2026, 22.8%. 6 months before, above 81%. 5-star properties slashed rack rates by 20 to 40%. Revenue per available room, which had grown 8% year-on-year in the first months of 2025, reversed direction, with a force analysts described as without modern precedent for the market. At the Karama Street Food Festival, vendors who had invested in stock for the international season reported that international sales were almost non-existent. The stalls were lit, the spices were ready. The international clientele was not there. The aroma hung in the air above empty tables. In the hotels along the Jumeirah Strip, corridors that required reservations months in advance sat silent. Pool decks designed for spectacle held no one. The infinity edges reflected only sky. Jumeirah beach restaurants that had required reservations weeks in advance offered immediate walk-in seating. Shops along the Dubai Mall Strip had extended their hours for a peak season that never arrived. Over 90% of Dubai's hotel staff are expatriates, drawn from over 120 nationalities. Their salaries were under pressure. Fixed costs continued. Operators who had borrowed against projected occupancy figures from a market that no longer existed faced a liquidity arithmetic that did not balance. The World Travel and Tourism Council noted that the Middle East's major hubs normally handle around 526,000 passengers each day, representing 5% of global arrivals and 14% of all transit passengers. That flow did not slow. It stopped. Every airline rerouted away from Gulf hubs during the crisis simultaneously discovered that alternative corridors existed. Those corridors ran through Riyadh, Doha, Istanbul. Traffic once rerouted tends to stay rerouted. Code shares are built. Frequent flyer miles accumulate on different airlines. Corporate travel managers update their preferred routing lists. The structural shift that a crisis accelerates is rarely undone by the resolution of the crisis itself. The question being asked in airline boardrooms from London to Singapore was whether the Gulf hub model itself had become a strategic liability. For nearly 3 decades, Dubai's proposition to the world rested on one word above all others: safe. Safe to invest, safe to transit, safe to bring your family, your conference, your luxury purchase, your honeymoon. The moment that word becomes a question rather than a statement, the mathematical advantage of every competitor narrows to near zero. Industry forecasters projecting 70 to 80% tourism recovery by October 2026 are making that projection conditional on a single phrase: if the April 7th ceasefire holds. A conditional recovery is not a recovery, and the clock that matters is not the one counting days since the last missile strike. It is the one counting days until the next booking cycle for the 2026 winter season. Cities have fallen before by mistaking momentum for permanence, by building supply faster than meaning, rooms faster than reasons to fill them with something irreplaceable. Dubai is not the first city to discover that grandeur without roots is a structure that needs constant maintenance, and that the maintenance becomes impossible the moment the world decides to look elsewhere. City that received 19.6 million international overnight visitors in 2025 and operated its airport at 95.2 million passengers, the highest in its history, watched its hotel occupancy collapse to 22.8% within weeks. The rival next door recorded 116 million visitors in 2024, committed $40.95 billion in inbound tourism spending in a single year, and is building 362,000 new hotel rooms before 2030. The foundation was never concrete. It was confidence. And confidence, unlike concrete, does not require a missile to crack. It requires only doubt.